Alrighty, welcome back to some beautiful One Piece action early in the morning. We got another red player here by the name of Camilo versus Green. Not a fun matchup for red, man. Not a fun matchup for red.
So definitely, one of the underrepresented matchups, I guess. A lot of blue players, a lot of purple players, but we got to see red versus green, a matchup that should be super interesting. And red got what I would consider a really optimal start. So let's see if we can pull it out.
Yeah, I would argue that red is in a very interesting spot for this tournament. Looking at the deck list and the colors being represented, I think red has a chance to potentially get a nice little upset, get a nice little couple wins here. But um, I'm concerned on how it will do in the the longevity of the game, like
Sure.
as the tournament progresses versus more difficult matchups back to back to back. But like you said, very optimal start from the red player, having the Nami, the Chopper, and a 2K to go ahead and attack to apply pressure.
Yeah. So
So let's see
definitely,
where he goes.
definitely, as it comes to skill expression and the types of players that float to the top, how much skill expression can you show in a red deck versus something like a purple or a green deck, which has arguably a lot more options at their disposal. So definitely that's one of the limiting factors for red. And I want to see if Camilo can put that skill expression to the test and show why he likes red so much, not in just this game, but every game. And we'll see what he can do.
I I think I think red is also a high skill based deck. As funny as that may sound, like knowing when to attack, when to stand your characters is very important. Um,
Yeah.
how the
uh,
way you use your Dawn, the fact that you have to play cards to use your effects optimally, and then like you can hit a trigger in security. It sounds really interesting, but red, as much as it is the aggro unga bunga deck, as people would say, is not that simple to play in a format where there's so many blockers, so much hand control that you have to think about. It is difficult, but red, like I said, having that fantastic start, able to put a lot of aggression here, having the jet pistol for the Drake, which is huge,
that's
and
massive,
then
yeah, for sure.
and manipulating his mana to go for a 6 into a 6. Now these are real numbers. 6 is a 2K counter, 6 is two 1K counters. That is mill 2, mill 1 card from hand, and we're just
Incredibly
gonna
good
pass.
attacks in the early game to be attacking with 6K, while the resources are medium to low on both sides before cards are amassed, and there's less of a chance of having 2Ks available to you. And definitely, I think less outspoken, skills that you need for a red deck. Like people attack if they have a big dude, they just swing. But theoretically, that is a skill that you can master when to do certain actions in the game, like attacking. And red is the one that you need to be the most aware of each attack that goes in because your cards are so susceptible to getting attacked on the way back. And so here, the green player seems to be in a lot of under a lot of duress, especially considering he has no board state because of that pistol that was cast last turn. And let's see how he comes back into the board. Like,
So yeah, that's the thing about green. When green loses board states, what have we learned that green does? Alternative game plan. And what is the alternative game plan? Kid is just chucking along, brother, and we're keeping cards in hand, right? But it looks like this green player is trying to fight for the board and plays a Basil Hawkins. That is a lot of Dawn use. You're leaving one up. He's thinking if he wants to play maybe Bonnie or is he thinking of attaching? Attaching is very scary.
attaching and aggroing, yeah. I mean, that might be the okay. So that might be the key for the red player against the green player, just applying enough pressure to where he's taxing cards in hand, and by doing so, he can essentially make it very difficult for the kid to get off ground, as you're seeing right here, but also in the late game, maybe having too few resources to go for multi attacks. So
Yeah,
that's
no, it's very that's always what red wants to do. It wants to tax you for playing a greedier, slower deck. Use your hand to tax, and sometimes you just don't have the cards or outlet to come back into the game. Basil Hawkins being summoned isn't terrible because in hand he's no combo power, no counter, so you're okay bringing him out. He's also a ton of pressure on his own. Issue is he's 5.
yeah, and another
If red
and
has another jet pistol here, I feel like you're just immediately blown out of the game. But by
yeah,
the
for
fact that
sure.
he blocked with the chopper, it kind of denotes that he doesn't have it, right? He
Yeah,
also needs to think from here on out, does this VV swing and give Basil Hawkins a restand, an easy kill? It becomes a little bit more complex. Everything he does from here needs to be very, very clean. So let's see how the red player takes it.
And it's interesting too how you mention it. Him being a lot, Camilo needed to be a lot more surgical in how he approaches his sequencing, how he approaches. Is kind of like a train, right? If you never slow it down, it'll just run you over, and that'll be that. And it's an easy
Yes,
game
sir.
from there. But if it ever starts slowing down, it's much less powerful. And I think Camilo needs to continue the pressure on the board, and it doesn't look like he has a straight answer for this 5 drop that the green player played, and it's really good in this matchup.
No, Basil Hawkins is a fantastic card, but what if I just told you we can mill him to life right now, right? Theoretically, we either eat 4 cards or we mill to life, and then we leave him with 1 life left.
I would
That puts
be
him in a very scary spot. So let's see how he
scary
goes
is
and
the right way to
approaches
do it.
this.
I wanted to touch back on how red could gain advantage not just in this matchup but seeing it move forward in the tournament as well. Every
Hmm.
time that you want to block it, it's not only 1k or 2k guard from your hand, but it's this particular card. So in some scenarios, let's say you have to discard a key card just to defend yourself, then you don't no longer have it for your own turn. So that might be like the small subtleties that the red players can take advantage of to continue winning in these rounds.
So he summons the Zoro, uses the Nami and the Luffy to attach the spent Dawn onto the VV. Swings for 6. Now 6 is saying you have to oppo me or double one me, which he's thinking about it. So it looks like he does have the oppo.
We've seen green discard multiple cards just to defend themselves before,
Oh no,
so
he's
he,
gonna
he
go
doesn't
for
have a
two.
problem
He
with
goes for
that.
2 1s. Now this is interesting. He's discarding the Bonnie. Bonnie is a very interesting card in this matchup because Bonnie is almost a bonus life. It is a card that
It
when it
is.
gets summoned, it almost has taunt, and you need to like the Nami will actually swing at the Bonnie, which is very funny. But
Just to
by
gain advantage.
losing,
No, and
yeah,
but
you
he
have to.
chooses to discard it, and he is being really aggressive with how he utilizes his hand to defend himself. He's taken 2 for 1s multiple times already, and he just wants to value keeping his life total high. It makes sense, but at the same time, he's just using a lot of these important resources, like you said, the Bonnie. Maybe it could have been better used on the following turn. It could be that the green player believes that the game won't go that far into the future if he just keeps taking this damage in the early game.
Well, that's the thing. He's gonna be taking this damage from like as I was saying, he is gonna be doing the play which I was talking about, which is the burn 4 cards or mill 2 life, or I guess like a medley. He burned 2, take 1. Green thinking about a trigger there. So yeah, hitting him with a 6 and a 7. Green, as much as it has a lot of combo power, its combo power comes in the shape of event cards. It's repels, it's scalpels. It doesn't really come off its minions. He has another chopper that's disgusting.
No,
So
and like you said before, Camilo being incredibly surgical with his sequencing, he got to do, partial take away cards from the opponent's hand and partial damage. As you alluded to, he went for that 2 damage play, only got 1 damage out of it because of how Green is using his resources, but he is in a commanding position right now.
100%. As the game progresses, you start to remove more and more options from the hand. The more Basil Hawkins that this green player is playing, the more of the 7 cost blocker kid that he's playing, more of the non-combo cards that are in the deck that just naturally fit. You just start losing cards after card after card. So this Basil Hawkins is going to go ahead, attach the Dawn to trigger its effect, swing at the VV, immediately triggering its effect to unsuspend itself or become active. And Camilo's just going to let the VV go. VV has done its job. If Camilo were to commit resources to protecting this VV, I would be very upset with him.
It would be a suboptimal choice
It's
indeed,
definitely
especially
suboptimal.
considering where he is right now. Maybe he wants to prioritize protecting the Zoro just in case any sort of card comes out to tap it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's where the green player really does start swinging the board advantage. A Basil Hawkins almost is, it's very difficult to remove from the board without Jet Pistol. If we can combo the Basil Hawkins with a Straw Sword, we can start clearing the board card after card after card. And once we're able to establish board control, then we're in a game state where green can safely drop a 7 drop kid, and then potentially try and win. The scary part about red though is that they have the non-blockable Luffy, the medium-sized Luffy as I like to call him, the 5
Hmm.
drop, as
That's
well
right.
as Diablo Jumbo. Diablo Jumbo, that card is so strong because sometimes you're protecting yourself off the back of a Beiji, and you're just like Beiji D's brother, take 15.
That's funny. Definitely a lot of different threats that can come out of Camilo's side, and the green player has to keep track of all of those.
You
He
have to
he
be
has to make
very
sure.
careful.
Yeah, exactly. He has to make sure that as much as we're saying that Camilo has to choose his points of attack, the green player also has decision points of where these attacks can go. And do you see him attacking with his 5 drop again?
If he turns his 5 drop sideways, the 5 drop almost becomes a lightning rod for the red player. Red player has to take care of it. So you
Mhm.
can think of it as gain a life. In a weird way, it gains blocker. Or Camilo can just choose to fully ignore it and just send it to the face. I mean, that's also another option. But usually, most often than not, if the Basil Hawkins is suspended or in an unactive, you might want to just try and take it down and get that board control. I think you guys touched upon it last game, but board control is so important in these limited battles. Being able to keep track of the board almost always allows you to win the game. That being said, red is one of the only decks that can bypass this because they have the rush mechanic. So you don't always need to have board control in order to potentially win the game.
Yeah, definitely an overwhelming amount of rushers from the side of Camilo might convince him to attack the green player's life instead of his cards on board currently. And it seems like the green player is slightly just far enough behind to where Camilo might want to do that on his turn. We'll see. He maneuvered the last turn very surgically. Let's see if he can do it again this turn.
No, he Camilo did great there, mitigating all damage coming from the green player and mitigating losses on his board state, which is kind of how you want to do. The more I've played this game, the more I've noticed you want to play as uber defensive as possible, and don't take lives if you don't have to, right? And don't
Okay.
block what you don't need to block. So, and that's how Camilo's been playing. We've been practicing a lot, and just seeing how he's playing, he's exemplifying it very well. Now, a lot of people talk about Zoro and Jinbei, right? Let's take a good little a little transition to talking about these three costs. So, best 3 drops in the game: Sentamaru and the stage in purple. Let's not even argue
For sure.
those guys. Let's take those guys out of the equation. Jinbei and Zoro, though, extremely mana efficient cards. For
Hmm.
one Dawn,
That's true.
Zoro's hitting you for 7. For one Dawn, Jinbei's double hitting you for 6. Those
Mhm.
numbers are just really
Really
crisp in
crazy.
this game.
For sure.
Very crisp. So, funnily enough, let's see how much Dawn Camilo chooses to apply here to his board state. Because you might want to keep some in hand. You might want to use a rusher. It's very interesting. The fact that green left up 2 Dawn almost certainly signifies that he has a repel in hand. So you know that you have to deal with 9k if you want to deal damage. You also don't have to immediately swing with 9. Sometimes 8 is equal to 9. Sometimes 7 is equal to 9. Let's just
Yeah.
find out if he can try and kind of like big brain his opponent and say, you actually have exactly this much combo power and you're going to use it this way.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be exact on how much combo power the opponent has necessarily. He just has to, make an educated guess on how much it could be and then work with the numbers from there. And going back to what you said about, 7, 8, 9K can always be equal to 9. It I believe what you mean by that is
Sometimes 6 is
basically,
equal to 9.
yeah, no, exactly. Like the
And
the
here we
resources
go. 8 is
required.
equal to
Yeah,
9.
there you go.
8 is equal to 9.
His card is always going to increase his power by 4,000, but it doesn't mean that you have to pump all 4,000 into your attack to be able to
Correct,
break through it.
correct.
So sometimes just baiting it out is all you need to do. And in this case, Camilo did that pretty expertly, and now he has this much Dawn to work with,
So
7 in total.
he does say 8 is equal to 9. Now he has the only event card that he has available to him is a Scalpel. So Scalpel will let you go up to 7. So again, 6 is equal to 7 sometimes. He does have a lot of Dawn active and he hasn't applied any cards to the board or used any effects. So he's going to go for the big Luffy. Now, big Luffy, amazing promo cards, probably the best promo card in the pack. This card is a 6-drop 7k, already very well statted. You
Yeah.
apply 2 Dawn, and he's now a 9k rusher. 9k rush is almost burn a life.
And it might be a
So
subtlety, but that turn 1 play that he made with the Nami in play has enabled him to attack quite a few more times this game so far. So definitely a shout out to the Nami putting us
shout
on
out
board.
to one of the best 1 drops in the game.
Yeah.
So he decides to clear the Hawkins. Very interesting, right? Because Hawkins is 6k base, and he's gonna just chuck them all in. He's really putting his opponent on a lot of pressure. 6 is almost equal to 7, and there it is. It just is equal, and he just has the Scalpel. So he's burned 2 of the most important resources out of his opponent's hand: the Repel and the Scalpel.
So
Issue is now we have a fully suspended board. So if the green player takes a turn here to just start doing some cleanup crew with the help of his X Drake as well as his leader, we might start seeing a fallback from the red player. So here's what
and
I
yeah.
want to see the green player do this turn. I want to see him attach a Dawn to X Drake, a very obvious play,
Mhm.
swing at the Zoro for 7. That's very scary as it is, because now the X Drake is suspended and his effect is active, which makes him and his leader big.
as we can see, Camilo only has two cards in hand, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
So
Seven is
definitely,
almost surely going to kill the Zoro. Seven is would mean he has to burn another Brook, burn both the cards in his hand, and you're just not willing to burn those cards as well as saying red doesn't have a lot of combo power in it of itself. So those two
maybe
cards in
Camilo
Camilo's hands could just be fake cards.
in identifying that he was gonna have so few defenses coming into this green player's turn. Maybe that's why he started with the rush plan, playing that Luffy down the last turn, just saying, "My cards are on the table. You deal with them how you can, but I'm just gonna throw as many hasters at you as possible from now on." So
Yeah, he has to just. This is where red needs to go. He needs to continue the gas, as you were saying. It is a
yeah,
train, and if the train starts to slow down, it will not be able to run you over. So let's see
and
how he goes about doing this turn. He's going to go and attach 3 to X-Drake, which is most certainly too much.
well, I was gonna comment on that because I think there could be like a small mind game going on here where even though the green player sees in play that Camilo only has two cards in hand, he might be saying, "Well, if I mess up my assignment of Dawn in some way, and Camilo just has two Ks in hand, for example, like worst case scenario, then
Hmm.
his Zoro survives or his Luffy survives, and now all of a sudden the game becomes
Well,
really
actually,
dire."
that's impossible because of Kid being such a bananas leader.
Yeah.
So when you just swing 7 with the X-Drake, that will require the double 2K, a single 2K. If he does burn the 2K, then you're just like, okay, attach a couple to your Kid, swing, restand Kid, swing over your Luffy. Because Kid, because of X-Drake being unactive, becomes base 6.
Oh, incredible! Yeah.
Yeah, so he on by just doing the one Dawn, he gets to use his Dawn very efficiently. He actually is able to just clear the big Luffy, which is very, very good. Now his leader is base 6, which could easily handle the Zoro, and we can start, like I said, getting the board state back. This is why
And
losing
even
that Bonnie was so question mark to me, because
mhm.
imagine you can clear the Zoro here, play Bonnie, suspend the Bonnie, and now we're able to tutor for some cards. Camilo can't really go into the Bonnie; he has to go for face, and then you just keep outvaluing him over the course of the time. But it is what it is.
and
We'll see Kid get 2 additional Dawn, making him a 8K, and he's gonna go 8K at Zoro. 8K is most certainly cannot be blocked. Yep. And this is the cleanup that I was talking about. We have a lot of Dawn that's available on the green player side, and let's see how he uses it to get this game back under control.
at this point,
Fool
even
5.
Camilo's Nami will have to start swinging a face here.
Yeah, no, Nami sometimes does have to get Nami unfortunately sometimes does have to get in there. He's gonna play Law. Now Law is this is really interesting because by unsuspending or making active the X Drake,
It
you
should
now
become
have
smaller, right?
yes, his board becomes smaller, but also he protects his X Drake. His X Drake is no longer in a position that can be attacked, that can be pushed over, but he is losing out on aggression. Is a by just Camilo being at 4 life, that is 5 hits that the green player has to do. So let's count it. He has 1 in Law, 1 in X Drake, and 2 in Kid. That's 4 hits. That is not enough to potentially end the game. So by doing this play, you have given Red a bonus turn,
Yeah, so
which
definitely the green player not taking into account that he could have tried to close out the game one turn fully sooner.
mhm.
And as we were saying before, just turns is all Camilo needs, assuming that he has all haste creatures in hand. If he can attack with every card in his hand, considering it basically a bullet, then giving him a whole extra turn might matter a lot.
Well, here's the thing. If we can force the green player to burn 2 life here, then we could potentially win off the course of El Diablo Jumble, right? We
Yeah,
can save all cards in hand. And by what I mean by burn 2 life is say, Nami hits you for 9. Right? No, I'm
right?
just kidding. That's not happening.
No,
But
no.
that's probably not happening. But you don't
Hopefully not.
always
Yeah,
have
right.
to, hopefully not. Hopefully, and this is one of the cards that definitely is very scary for the green player, right? Because this card is just too well statted.
Yeah,
6K rush
yeah.
in its just off the course of its back is too strong. I put the green player as not having any 2K counters just by the way that the game has progressed, and
At
that
least not
means that
available
he's
right now.
I
Yeah.
don't think available right now, and the fact that all of his Dawn is spent means that most certainly no repels or scalpels are left in his hand. So
He
these
used a good
this guy's
amount of
about to
those
get
in the
burned.
early game
This
when
guy is
Camilo
about to
forced them
get
out of
burned.
him. And so let's see what happens here because Camilo played the Luffy pretty confidently onto the table, but at the same time now he's considering whether it goes in or not. So
No, no,
a
this
little bit
Luffy
of
goes in.
hesitation.
Most certainly, this turn is the only thing I'm considering personally that I would do differently is am I swinging at with you with six at with of Nami?
Okay.
That I
And he is deciding to do
And
exactly what
he
you just
will.
said.
This is good. So a five Nami means either burn a card in hand, which he's at three, or you must take this damage. And by taking this is a potential try to win the game right now. But this sets up and he dumps in. So he had the Bonnie in hand, chooses to play Law instead. Very interesting.
Do
So
you
we're gonna
think
go
that
ahead.
maybe Camilo could have put more into this Nami, or does he need the Dawn for something else in particular?
I think all Camilo needs to do is burn two life here. He needs to burn two life no matter how this turn goes. So as either the Nami's hitting for six and the Luffy's hitting for five, I think he could have turned this turn into a six on the Nami, a six on the leader, and then an eight on the big
Camilo could
Luffy.
actually be as next level as possible to be determining I need this amount of
Perfect.
Dawn to take your life on this turn and also have enough Dawn to survive on the way back. And he make those
So
calculations pretty well because he took both life, like you said.
no, this is exactly what you want to see from the red player. He left one up, which signifies the guard point, but sometimes you don't really like I said, you're not dead this turn. There is no feasible way you're dead.
Right.
So I wouldn't have left the Dawn up. I don't think the guard point is gonna extend the game by one or two more turns.
Yeah.
So
He
but
he
I
could have actually
respect it.
tried
This is he
to.
still did what he needed to do while accomplishing to keep a guard point up, which is honestly just better than what I would have done. I would have just burned my whole Dawn and just said, you're gonna take two life, and then I'm gonna
Mhm.
kill you with this Diablo Jumbo that is most certainly in my hand.
Maybe prior to I mean, even if he did have a guard point in his hand, considering that he probably thinks next turn is the final turn of the game, I think that any life that he would take in damage, he would just add to his hand. He would not
Exactly.
guard
Think
any
of it as
amount.
a double draw. Exactly.
Exactly.
So the game, and that's what's interesting about red. Red doesn't have a lot of draw, but by you, like it puts you in this game state where you're at zero life. Red is at almost full life. So you are most certainly forced to close the game in two turns, and by doing so, you're giving them like a full mulligan.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what green doesn't want to do, but is forced to do, because either another medium-sized Luffy comes out and kills you, or you die to Diablo Jumbo.
You had to close out the game at some point, and the best thing that the green player can do right now is pick and choose when he wants to add the cards to Camilo's hand
Hmm.
and try to deal with his board first. We'll see what he does.
So by swinging seven at this Luffy, the Luffy has necessarily gained a life, right? Gained him a life.
Mhm.
But Camilo kind of wants the green player to hit him
Yeah, he doesn't want to gain, substitute life through his,
through his board.
yeah, through his board right now. He definitely wants to just be taking a little bit of life, gaining that card advantage, like you mentioned, finding the key cards in those Luffy's, and he is debating Guardian right now. Let's see what he does.
There is something to be said about this. Green doesn't have to. Green's win condition. So I've been talking a lot about the red side, right? Because I've been practicing with this red player. I've been enjoying a lot of red lately. So let me talk a
Mhm.
little bit about how green could potentially win this game. Although this game does look very, very terrible. There are some situations where you just actually cannot win. If he does have Diablo Jumbo or another medium Luffy, it just is what it is, right? Cards that become unblockable and hit you for big numbers in such a limited board state are just game. So we're just going to assume that he doesn't have those things. So how do we win this game? We have to do very light chip this turn and then fully kill him on the next turn.
Yeah, give him
We
as little
can't give him
resources in
five
this turn as
cards.
possible. Yes.
Exactly. We cannot give him five cards. We can give him maybe one or two. But we also have to develop a blocker in doing so, because if we don't develop a blocker, he's just going to go 10 on Luffy, right? So you're going to go 7 on the blocker. Leaving 2 Dawn up is also fine. I believe this law has to turn sideways.
Yeah, it must. And also, I feel like the green player is solidifying a little bit of a comeback right now, and it looked dire for him the previous
Mhm.
turn, certainly toward the beginning of the game, but now it seems like he is in a decent spot. Camilo can still take those cards from life, like we said before, and try to
Mhm.
find an answer, but right now, closing it out might be reasonably difficult from here.
Agreed. There are some cards that, like I said, just immediately end the game, and there's just nothing you can do about it, just based off of the cards that you have left in hand, right? He has what seems to be 4 cards in hand. Even he'd have to be up to 3 Dawn to so you can go double Scalpel to potentially block a 15 if he has a Diablo Jumbo.
Then
So
is Camilo
I think
also.
he's just thinking right now on what he wants to do here, because a medium-sized Luffy, as I would say here on the screen, I'm not sure if it ends the game entirely because I think the most it can get to is what he'll do five, attach one, so four. He taps another six. Six plus one, seven. It can get up to 13. Can you block a 13 with four cards in hand? That's tough.
It's tough. I
that
agree.
sounds very tough.
You-
Unblockable 13 with four in hand, I don't think is possible. You need like
Would you go back
repel,
to previous
scalpel.
turn and say that Camilo had a small window where he might have been able to close it out, depending on if he, used that one extra Dawn into one of his other attacks? It'd be
So
interesting to see.
here's the thing. If he had just kept that Luffy in hand as opposed to playing him last turn and then say Nami 8, Luffy 10 to
Yeah,
burn those two life, and then
yeah,
he goes medium-sized Luffy game, it was actually unwinnable for him, right?
yeah. I think he used his Luffy instead of going in with the resources that he already had in play, thereby
Mhm.
effectively losing a key card in his hand, and so now he's in a much worse
He's
position.
in a much worse position. Although it did look good, I assumed that by him playing the Luffy on the previous turn, he had some other rusher follow-up, but it doesn't look like he's doing that. He is just going to swing with the leader, though, meaning that he doesn't have the Diablo Jumble. That is not the card that he's going to be trying to go for game with. He's going 5k by what I think at the X Drake, which
He might
you
be trying
don't
to
want to.
bait out this block
You're
from the big
trying to
blocker
bait the
so that he could.
block, but
Yeah.
that's just too obvious of a bait. I think you can choose to expend a 1k counter here.
Would you have put maybe? It depends. It depends fully on the resources that Camilo has available to him. But putting a little bit of resources into this Luffy might have forced the green player into a much worse position. We'll see.
No, I don't think so. I think what worst comes to worst, you just let the Drake die. You know what I mean? And people make that mistake often in this game where they're like they'll see it like an easy block. They're like, I can just use two 1Ks and I can make this live. But those two 1Ks are most certainly important cards that if you just had them at a different point in time of the game, you wouldn't lose.
Yeah.
So you can just let it die sometimes. Like this 5K is a bait. He's gonna choose to drop the 1K. 1K is fine. You're not too sad about losing that. And then
Oh, he has
there
it.
you go. And you've lost one key card in hand, and now you're gonna have to block a 13, brother. Can you block a 13 without the 1K? Probably not.
I
Anyways, you
think
needed
Camilo's moving pretty quickly. I think he's done the math. He knows that the opponent doesn't have an out to the swing, most likely.
oh, it's
From his
12K.
body
I just
language, I
can't do
think he
math.
knows he has it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, 12K. So he's gonna go four here on the repel, which will put him to 9, 10, and then he's just memeing around. But
And he
yeah,
did it. Yeah, even with another 2K, it would have matched only. And
so so that's what I'm saying. Had he had the Kobe in hand and the
yeah, exactly.
scalpel, he actually just wins the game. But that's what I'm trying to get at. Sometimes by doing these weird swings, and you're like, yeah, I just have to dump a 1K. A
That
1K is most certainly sometimes the difference
critically
between winning
important.
and losing the game.
Yeah, and I think that chip attack, going back to that Luffy,
Oh my goodness.
if Camilo makes the mistake to also attack with his leader Luffy, putting one or two down in it, then he has much less to go for the all-in play on his bigger Luffy, and then
On his
that could have
opponent's
also
side.
cost him the game.
No, he
So
did fantastic there. Just what the practice, practice does make perfect, and that's what it comes down to.
yeah,
He did most certainly have those cards. For a second there, the way that his swings looked seemed a little troll. I'm like, man, if he used that Luffy without having a second one, he almost threw the game. But
yeah,
Camilo being Camilo, he has two rush Luffys.
and honestly, going back to how he utilized his cards in that game, I think there was a lot of mind gaming that went into that game as well, and also a lot of play in the table. That skill expression that we were talking about earlier, and I think that is how Red gets a lot of its key victories. Is there were many different ways that he could have maneuvered through the final turn, and we saw the green player just needed 3 more K to effectively block that attack and win the game. He had the cards to do it. It just so happens that because of how Camilo attacked that little bait attack, discarding a 1K and going for the all in right afterward. He also made it seem like he didn't have the unblockable Luffy, but the third copy came through. So
That's when well, it was the second
oh,
copy, I believe.